Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel. I am super excited to be here on ThermOWeb's YouTube channel today. We'll be making some rainbow cards with the ThermOWeb Deco Foil Flock transfer sheets. The first technique that I'm going to do is a very basic die cut inlay with those flock transfer sheets. So let's get started with this first card. The first thing I did was take some strips of the Deco Foil Flock transfer sheets and use some purple tape to hold them in place on the back of the die there. That helps me not waste an entire sheet of flock, and I can just get the piece of the die that I want to cut out. Next, I cut out the panel die with some white cardstock, and I am stamping the sentiment, "Happy Birthday to You," with some black VersaFine Onyx ink. And I'm using my mini MISTI so that I can double stamp it and get a really nice, crisp, dark impression there. Once that's complete, I am ready to start putting this card together and doing my die cut inlay. So I am using some Ultra Bond, which is a liquid adhesive, very strong, on the back of that die cut panel there. And I'm just putting a little bit everywhere. A little bit goes a long way with Ultra Bond. And I'm going to lay it down on a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch cardstock panel there. Once that's done, I am ready to start doing my die cut inlay. So you can do this in two ways. You can put some of the liquid adhesive on the back of your flock strips, or you can put a little line of liquid adhesive inside the part of the panel that you are placing these pieces in. And you're basically just popping them in like puzzle pieces. It's super simple, very easy to do, but I love the way it looks. I love all the texture that you get from the flock, and I love all these colors. Now, I will link to all the colors that I used down below in the YouTube description. They'll also be on the blog in the description below the blog post as well. So once you have all of your rainbow strips glued in, you are pretty much done with this card, and you just need to put it on a card base. The second way is to use some ink blending, and I love the way that this makes it look like you have watercolor flock. So this is kind of a faux watercolor flock look. I cut out this fresh rainbow panel die out of white flock. So this is the ThermOWeb Deco Foil Flock Transfer Sheet in white, and I'm going to take all of these pieces and they are going to get ink blended. Now, I like to use Distress Oxide inks for my ink blending because I think they're super smooth. But you'll see I am not doing ink blending the way I would on cardstock with lots of circles and pressure to make it smooth, and that's how you get that kind of faux watercolor look. I don't want to do lots of hard circles when I am ink blending on flock because it is possible to remove some of that flock when you do it that hard. Now, the flock does not come off its paper backing just by shaking it or anything like that, but if you are doing something as aggressive as ink blending on it, yes, you can peel some of it off or push some of it off, especially because you're getting it a little bit wet with that ink as well. So I am going to just cover up all these with a little bit of ink, and I'm mostly like pouncing that ink blending tool rather than rubbing it on the flock. Okay, now I'm going to take my 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch cardstock panel and I'm going to cover it with tape runner. And I don't want a lot of open spaces because I want to make sure that this whole thing is covered with adhesive so I can place the cardstock die cut panel down right on top, and then like the last one, we can just pop these into those open areas. So whether you use liquid adhesive or a tape runner, this die cut inlay technique is really fun and easy to do and easy to create a rainbow. The added benefit of the watercolor or faux watercolor flock look is just another way to create that rainbow on your card. So I'm just going to complete adding in these little pieces here. You see that I'm using my palette knife there to pick them up so that I don't scratch them with my nail because I kept doing that and taking it off with my nail. Once again, I am going to stamp the sentiment on the cardstock piece, and that completes that card as well. The last card that we're going to create is we're going to use the Deco Foil Transfer Gel Duo to create a background. So I have my Duo gel, I have my pixie spray and a stencil from Whimsy Stamps, a palette knife, and my stencil pal from ThermOWeb. And I am ready to start working on this card. I have a couple of pieces of the Gina K Designs for ThermOWeb white cardstock. I'm going to spray the back of my stencil over my waffle flower water medium mat with some pixie spray, lay my cardstock down, and that's going to stick, and then the back of my stencil will stick to the cardstock. I'm going to use the palette knife to put a big blob of the Duo Gel on the stencil palette, and then I'm going to work in the direction of the stencil and wipe that Duo Gel on top. The stencil palette creates a nice consistent, even application of your Duo Gel, and I just go over and make sure that every open area of that stencil is covered and it's nice and even. Once I'm ready, I'm going to just take the palette knife to grab that corner of the stencil because everything was nice and secure. I'm going to peel it off, and then I'm going to set this aside to dry. It needs to be clear before you can apply the flock. Once it is dry, you'll see that it's clear there. I am going to apply the flock in a rainbow. So I am going to use the Electropop Neon flock. This is the new Rina K Designs flock transfer sheets, and I am going to make sure that I'm only covering up a certain amount of those rays with each color. So that's why I'm trying to make sure that I don't cover too many or too few, and that I cover from the bottom all the way to the top. Now I'm going to go to orange, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a little bit of purple tape just to keep these strips in place and make sure that they stay where they're supposed to be to cover up those rays. So I'm going to keep working all the way around, and then I'm going to add a little bit more purple tape to keep it in place. And then once that's ready, I am going to run this through my die cut machine. So I just place it in my sandwich the way I would if I were cutting out a thin metal die. Then I start peeling everything off, and you can see that everything stayed nice and together because of that purple tape. And when it ran through the die cut machine, the pressure applied the flock to the Duo Gel. So you don't need to use a laminator if you're using the Duo Gel. You can just use pressure. I'm going to trim this down so that there is no margin on the outside of that rainbow ray there, and then I'm going to be mounting it on black cardstock and then on a white card base. I have a heart that I die cut from Waffle Flower's Nesting Hearts die, and I am using some Electropop Neon ink in Poppin' Pink to ink blend around that heart. I'm going to cover up that open circle that was at the bottom of the rainbow rays there and just cut off the bottom of the heart, so you'll still know that it's a heart, but it will be flush to the bottom of the card. I'm going to use some Blaring Blue ink to stamp my sentiment, which says, "You are my sunshine," and I'm going to pop this up with some Gina K Designs for ThermOWeb white foam tape. So I'm going to remove those protective backings there and place this right over that white area at the bottom of the rainbow. Once that's done, I am going to place a little bit of tape runner on the black cardstock rather than flip this rainbow over and risk smearing that blue ink, which might have still been a little bit wet. I'm going to do the same thing here with my white card base. So this is a slightly larger square card. It's about 6 by 6. And now I'm going to use some Ultra Bond liquid adhesive to adhere my sequins. This is my favorite liquid adhesive to use for small embellishments like sequins or confetti because it dries clear, because the nozzle tip is nice and thin and comes out in a tiny little dot if you want it to. So you can definitely use it for large background areas if you want to squeeze a little bit harder and get a lot of the adhesive coming out, but it does do a nice fine little dot for those little itty bitty confettis like I am applying here. And small embellishments are a great way to cover up little mistakes. I had some ink smear on my sentiment, so that's why the heart got a few, and then I had a couple of places that I just wanted to cover up on the rays as well. So that's 3 different ways to create rainbows using ThermOWeb's Deco Foil Flock Transfer Sheets, whether you're using die cut inlay or you're die cut inlaying a faux watercolor look, or whether you're creating a background with a stencil and the Duo Gel. It is really easy to create a rainbow of colors with the beautiful flock colors that are available. So if you're interested in any of the supplies that I used today, they will all be linked down in the description below. I want to thank you so much for stopping by today. Have a wonderful day.